I wasn't the jealous type. At least, that's what I always told myself. That night, my husband Mark fell asleep on the couch, TV still glowing blue against his face. His phone slipped from his hand and landed on the rug. I don't know what came over me. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was the way he'd been guarding that phone like it held state secrets. We've been married 7 years. No kids. Just a quiet little house outside Columbus, Ohio. Life wasn't perfect, but it wasn't broken either. Or so I thought. I picked up his phone. My hands actually shook. I knew his passcode. It was our anniversary. I hesitated for a full minute before typing it in. Unlocked. I don't know what I expected to find. Sports texts, work emails, maybe nothing at all. Instead, I saw her name at the top of his messages. Lena, my best friend since college. The preview alone made my stomach drop. Last night was worth the risk. I felt the air leave my lungs. I opened the thread. Pictures. Selfies. Messages that went back months. Flirting turned into plans. Plans turned into hotel reservations. I scrolled and scrolled, my heart pounding louder with every swipe. Then I saw it. A photo sent just hours earlier. Lena in a hotel mirror, wearing the necklace I helped her pick out. And in the reflection, sitting on the edge of the bed behind her, Mark, shirtless, smiling. I didn't cry. That's the strange part. I didn't scream or throw the phone. I just stood there in the dark living room, staring at proof that my marriage and my friendship had been a lie. The final message from him read, "Same place next Friday." She'll never know. She'll never know. I gently locked his phone and placed it back on the rug beside him. He stirred slightly but didn't wake up. In that moment, something inside me shifted. The hurt didn't disappear. It hardened. If they thought I would never know, they had no idea who they were dealing with. And by the time I was done, they'd wish I had stayed clueless. Part 2? The next morning, I made pancakes. Blueberry, Mark's favorite. I even kissed him on the cheek when he shuffled into the kitchen, acting half asleep, rubbing his eyes like he hadn't spent the night betraying me in a downtown hotel. Morning, he mumbled. Morning, I replied, smiling so naturally it scared me. If he noticed anything different about me, he didn't show it. He ate breakfast, scrolled through his phone, and complained about traffic on I-70 like it was the biggest problem in his life. Meanwhile, I was memorizing every micro expression on his face. When his phone buzzed, I watched him. He flipped it over instantly. A reflex, guilt in motion. Lena texted me around noon. Brunch this weekend? I miss you. The audacity made my hands tremble. I stared at her name on my screen, remembering the hotel mirror photo, remembering how she'd cried on my shoulder 3 months ago about never finding a good man. I typed back, of course. Same place Saturday? If they thought I'd explode, confront, or fall apart, they clearly didn't know me at all. That afternoon, I started digging. I logged into our shared laptop. Mark wasn't as careful as he thought. His email was still signed in. Within minutes, I found the hotel confirmations. Same boutique hotel near Easton Town Center. Same room type. Always booked under his middle name. 6 visits in for months. 6. Each one felt like a nail sealing something shut inside me. I screenshotted everything. Sent it to a new email account I created just for this. I wasn't acting out of rage anymore. I was collecting evidence. Then I checked our bank statements. Flowers delivered to Lena's apartment. Jewelry purchases. Expensive dinners I was told were client meetings. He wasn't just cheating. He was investing in her. That night, he kissed me goodnight like nothing was wrong. Like I wasn't lying next to a stranger. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, going over every memory of the past year. The late work nights. The sudden gym membership. The new cologne. Every red flag I ignored now looked neon. But here's the thing they didn't understand. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to beg. And I definitely wasn't going to warn them. Because revenge isn't loud. It's patient. And Saturday brunch with Lena, that was going to be my opening move. Saturday arrived bright and cruelly beautiful. Lena was already seated when I walked into the cafe, all sunshine and fake warmth. She jumped up to hug me, smelling like vanilla perfume and betrayal. "Oh my God, I've missed you," she said, squeezing me tight. I hugged her back. I wondered if she could feel how steady my heartbeat was. We ordered mimosas. She talked about work drama, a new pilot's class, some guy who wouldn't text her back fast enough. I watched her mouth move and thought about that hotel mirror photo. The same lips now laughing across from me. You and Mark still good? She asked casually, stirring her drink. There it was. I smiled. Yeah. Why wouldn't we be? She shrugged. I don't know. Married life gets boring sometimes. Boring. I tilted my head slightly. Does it? She smirked just for a second. A flash of something smug. Something that said she thought she had won something. That was when I knew. This wasn't a drunken mistake. This wasn't confusion. They were comfortable. I reached across the table and grabbed her hand dramatically. I'm actually so glad I have you, I said softly. You're the only person I really trust. The irony almost made me laugh. Her eyes softened. Always, she said. Always. I spent the rest of brunch planting seeds. I casually mentioned that Mark had been stressed about money, that we were thinking about refinancing the house, that things felt a little unstable. I watched her reaction carefully. There it was again, a flicker. Calculation. She didn't care about my marriage, but she cared about security. Interesting. Before we left, she excused herself to the bathroom. The moment she disappeared, I pulled out my phone and logged into the tracking app Mark didn't know I had access to, the one connected to our shared car insurance account. His location popped up. Not at the office, not at the gym. He was at the exact same hotel near Easton. Room booked under his middle name. Again, while I was sitting across from his mistress. The boldness of it almost impressed me. Lena returned, smiling, lipstick freshly applied. Everything okay? She asked. I smiled back sweetly. Oh yeah? I said. Everything's perfect. And in that moment, my revenge plan stopped being an idea. It became a blueprint. They thought they were playing me. They had no idea I was about to rewrite the entire game. That afternoon, I didn't go home. I drove, not aimlessly, intentionally. My mind was clear in a way it hadn't been in years. The shock had burned off, leaving something colder behind. Focus. If Mark wanted hotel rooms and secrets, I'd give him something unforgettable. But revenge without protection is just chaos. And I wasn't about to destroy my own future while punishing theirs. First stop, a divorce attorney. I chose a firm downtown with intimidating glass walls and a waiting room that smelled like expensive coffee. I didn't cry when I explained. I didn't dramatize. I simply slid printed screenshots across the polished desk. Hotel confirmations, bank statements, photos. The lawyer, a sharp woman in her early 40s, scanned everything carefully. You've been thorough, she said. I'm just getting started, I replied. Ohio wasn't a fault-only state, but documented infidelity still mattered, especially when marital funds were being used. And Mark had been very generous. The attorney advised me to gather more financial records quietly, secure copies of retirement accounts, make sure important documents were safe. Don't confront him yet. Let him keep thinking he's clever. I smiled at that. Second stop, the bank. We had a joint savings account when I'd been contributing to for years. I didn't drain it. I wasn't reckless. But I opened a separate account in my name only. Transferred what was legally mine. Third stop, home. Mark wasn't back yet. I walked through our house slowly, looking at it differently now. The furniture we picked together, the photos from vacations, the wedding portrait hanging proudly in the hallway. I took it down, not smashed, not dramatic, just placed it face down in the closet. Then I did something simple but powerful. I changed the Wi-Fi password and removed his laptop and tablet from the auto login settings tied to our shared accounts. Small inconveniences, tiny fractures in his comfort. That evening, he walked in smelling like expensive soap that didn't belong to our shower. Hey, he said casually, how was brunch? Great, I answered, meeting his eyes steadily. Lena sends her love. If he felt fear, he hid it well. But I noticed something else. His confidence. They thought they were untouchable. That was their biggest mistake. Because while they were sneaking around hotel rooms, I was building a case file. And next Friday, when they booked that same room again, I was going to be there first. Not to scream, not to fight, but to end them socially, legally, and financially in one single move. They wanted a secret affair. I was about to give them a public reckoning. Friday came faster than I expected. I woke up before sunrise, calm, almost peaceful. The kind of calm you feel before a storm hits when the air is too still, too quiet. Mark was already in the shower. I could hear him humming. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, remembering our wedding day. The vows, the promises, the way he held my hands like I was the only woman in the world. Now I knew better. When he left for a late client dinner, he kissed my forehead. "I might be home late," he said casually. "I know," I replied, smiling gently. He froze for half a second, just long enough. After he left, I waited 10 minutes before grabbing my purse and keys. I didn't follow him immediately. That would have been too obvious. Instead, I drove straight to the boutique hotel near Easton Town Center, the same one from every confirmation email. I walked into the lobby like I belonged there. Because I did. Earlier that week, I had made my own reservation. Same floor. Room directly across from the one he always booked under his middle name. The clerk smiled politely as I checked in. "Enjoy your stay." "Oh, I would." I entered my room and set my bag down slowly. My heart was steady. No shaking, no tears, just precision. At 6:42 p.m., my phone buzzed. Location alert. Mark had arrived. I stepped into the hallway and stood quietly near the corner, pretending to check my phone. And then I saw them. Lena stepped off the elevator first, wearing a tight red dress. Mark followed behind her, hand low on her back, guiding her toward the room. They were laughing. He pulled the keycard from his wallet. The door clicked open. They slipped inside together. I waited 30 seconds. Then I walked to their door. Not to knock. Not yet. Instead, I slid something underneath it. A large manila envelope. Inside were printed screenshots of every message between them. Every hotel receipt. Every bank statement showing how he'd funded their little fantasy. And on top of it all, one simple note written in bold black ink. "Enjoy your last night together. Your wives and your lawyers will be in touch." Yes, wives. Because Lena wasn't single. She had a fiancé. And I had already scheduled an email to send him everything at exactly 7 p.m. My phone buzzed. 7 o'clock. Sent. From inside the room, I heard sudden movement. A chair scraping. Muffled voices rising. Confusion. Panic. I stepped back into the hallway shadows and watched the chaos begin. This wasn't rage. This was strategy. And tonight was only the beginning. At 7:02 p.m., the arguing started. It wasn't loud at first, just sharp whispers bleeding through the door. "What is this?" Lena's voice, tight and shaking. "I don't know." Mark snapped back. "Did you tell someone? Are you insane?" "Why would I?" A thud. Something hit the wall. I stayed at the end of the hallway, out of sight but close enough to hear the unraveling. My phone buzzed again. A new email notification. From Lena's fiancé. Subject line: "What the hell is this?" I didn't open it. I didn't need to. I already knew. Inside that hotel room, Mark's phone probably lit up at the same time. Maybe Lena's too. Maybe they were both staring at screens that suddenly felt heavier than bricks. Another sound from the room, the door lock clicking. And then it flew open. Mark stepped into the hallway, face pale, eyes scanning wildly. He didn't see me at first. He was too busy trying to call someone. Probably me. His phone pressed to his ear, straight to voicemail, because I had turned mine off. Lena appeared behind him, mascara already smudged, clutching the envelope in her trembling hands. "My fiancé just texted me," she hissed. "He got everything." Mark's voice dropped. "This is your fault." "My fault? You're the one who..." They froze when they finally saw me, standing calmly by the elevator, watching. For a moment, none of us spoke. Mark's expression shifted from confusion to realization to something close to fear. "You..." he breathed. I offered a small, polite smile. "Good evening." Lena's mouth fell open. "How did you find out?" I tilted my head. "You really should have deleted the mirror photos." Silence. Heavy. Crushing. Mark stepped toward me. "Let's talk about this." "There's nothing to talk about," I replied evenly. "My attorney will handle it." The word hit him like a slap. "Attorney?" he repeated. "Yes," I said calmly. "You've been very generous with marital funds. The judge will love that." Lena's breathing quickened. "My fiancé is coming here." "Oh," I said softly. "Then you might want to stay." The elevator dinged behind me. Perfect timing. The doors slid open, and a tall, furious man stepped out, phone clenched in his fist. He looked from Lena to Mark, to the open hotel room, and then to me. "Are you the one who sent this?" he asked. "Yes," I answered. He nodded once. "Thank you." The storm that followed wasn't mine to manage. I stepped into the elevator as shouting erupted behind me, accusations, betrayal, Years of lies collapsing in minutes. The doors closed slowly. As I descended to the lobby, I didn't feel victorious. I felt free, but I wasn't done. Not yet. Because humiliation was only phase one. Divorce court was coming, and Mark had no idea how prepared I was. I slept better that night than I had in months. Not because I wasn't hurting, but because the truth was finally in the open. Mark didn't come home. He called 23 times, texted, voicemails ranging from anger to desperation. Please just let me explain. It wasn't what you think. You're blowing this out of proportion. Out of proportion. I let every message sit unanswered. At 8:15 a.m., there was a knock at the door. I knew it was him before I even checked the camera. He looked wrecked. Same suit from the night before, wrinkled. Eyes bloodshot. Confidence gone. I opened the door but didn't step aside. We need to talk, he said. No. I replied calmly. You need to listen. He blinked, clearly not expecting that tone. I have already retained an attorney, I continued. I have copies of every transaction, every hotel receipt, every message, including the ones where you discussed using our savings for weekend trips. His jaw tightened. You went through my phone. You went through my best friend, I answered flatly. Let's not compare violations. He ran a hand through his hair. It was a mistake. 6 hotel stays is not a mistake, I said. It's a pattern. Silence stretched between us. Then he tried a different tactic. Softer voice, almost pleading. We can fix this. That almost made me laugh. You weren't trying to fix anything when you were booking rooms under your middle name. He flinched. Good. I've moved half of our joint savings into an individual account, I added. Legally mine. The rest is documented. You can't just. I already did. For the first time in our marriage, I saw something raw in his expression. Not love, not regret. Fear. You embarrassed me, he muttered. I stared at him. I embarrassed you? I repeated quietly. You detonated our marriage in a hotel room. I simply turned on the lights. He had no answer. Just then, his phone buzzed again. He looked down reluctantly, and whatever he saw drained the last bit of color from his face. Lena, probably spiraling, probably blaming him, probably watching her own engagement collapse in real time. How's she doing? I asked, unable to resist. He shot me a look. This isn't funny. It's not supposed to be. I stepped back slightly, but not to let him in. To be clear, I said evenly, you'll be served papers this week. If you want to avoid this, getting uglier financially, and publicly you'll cooperate. You'd really destroy everything, he asked. I held his gaze. You already did. And with that, I closed the door. But revenge wasn't finished evolving. Because Mark thought losing me was the worst consequence. He hadn't yet realized what losing reputation, money, and credibility would feel like. And that part was coming next. By Monday morning, the damage had spread beyond hotel walls. Lena's fiancé had posted a vague but unmistakable message online about betrayal and liars living double lives. He didn't tag names. He didn't have to. Their mutual friends were already connecting dots. I didn't post anything. Silence is powerful. Mark, however, was unraveling. He worked in corporate sales. Image mattered. Trust mattered. And apparently, word travels fast when a furious, almost groom starts forwarding screenshots to mutual acquaintances. At 10:30 a.m., Mark called again. This time I answered. What? I said calmly. Did you send those screenshots to anyone else? He demanded. I leaned back in my chair. I sent them to the person who deserved the truth. You've ruined my life. I exhaled slowly. No, Mark. I exposed it. He lowered his voice. HR called me in this morning. There it was. Affairs aren't illegal, but when they involve overlapping social circles, shared business contacts, and public drama, companies don't love that kind of attention. Are you blaming me for your employer knowing you lack judgment? I asked evenly. Silence. Then frustration. You could have handled this privately. You handled it privately, I replied. For 6 months. He didn't respond. Because he couldn't. Meanwhile, I met with my attorney again. We went over everything in detail: financial misuse, emotional distress, documented proof of ongoing infidelity. In Ohio, the court might not care about heartbreak, but it absolutely cares about money trails. And Mark had left fingerprints everywhere. We filed the paperwork that afternoon. Divorce, grounds, incompatibility, and financial misconduct. I didn't feel triumphant signing my name. I felt decisive. That evening, Lena called me. I almost didn't pick up. Almost. You're evil, she said immediately, voice hoarse from crying. That's dramatic, I replied calmly. You destroyed my engagement. I paused, letting that sink in. No, I said softly. You destroyed it when you walked into that hotel room. She began sobbing. He left. He took his ring back. My parents know. Everyone knows. There it was again. Reputation. Consequences. The things they never calculated. You could have just confronted us, she whispered, and give you time to twist the story? I asked quietly. No, I prefer documentation. She had no comeback, just breathing on the other end. Before hanging up, I added one final sentence. You were my best friend. And then I ended the call. But I wasn't done reclaiming my life. Because revenge isn't just about tearing others down. It's about rebuilding stronger. And I was about to make a move neither of them saw coming. By Wednesday, Mark had moved into a short-term rental across town. Not because I kicked him out. Because my attorney advised me to change the locks. Legally. And I did. He tried to frame it as me being dramatic. But the reality was simple. The house was in both our names. And until the court decided otherwise, I had every right to protect my space. What he didn't realize, I had one more card to play. That afternoon, I received a call from my attorney. We've reviewed his recent transactions more closely, she said. There's something interesting. Interesting was her polite word for devastating. Mark hadn't just spent money on hotels and dinners. He had used funds from our joint home equity line without telling me. Not a massive amount, but enough. Enough to shift this from bad husband to financial misconduct. And judges don't appreciate hidden withdrawals. I sat very still as she explained what this meant. If we present this correctly, she continued, your position very strongly, especially if he wants to avoid court. Avoid court. That was the key. Mark cared about image, about control, about not looking like the villain. And court records? They're public. That evening, he showed up again, more cautious this time. Less angry, more nervous. I got served, he said quietly. I know, he swallowed. We don't have to drag this through court. I studied him carefully. What are you offering? I asked. His eyes flickered. He hadn't expected that response. I'll agree to sell the house and split the profit evenly, he said quickly. No fighting. No public hearings. I let the silence stretch. And the retirement accounts? I asked. He hesitated. Split, he muttered. And the equity line you dipped into without telling me? His jaw tightened. I'll take that debt fully, he said finally. There it was. Leverage. You'll also cover my legal fees, I added calmly. His head snapped up. That's ridiculous. No, I said softly. What's ridiculous is thinking I wouldn't notice. We stared at each other for a long moment. The power dynamic had shifted completely. Finally, he exhaled. Fine. Just like that. Months of betrayal. 6 hotel rooms. Hundreds of lies. And in the end, he folded. But as he turned to leave, he said something that almost made me pause. You didn't even cry, he said quietly. Did you ever love me? I met his eyes steadily. I loved who I thought you were. And that was the truth. As the door closed behind him, I didn't feel rage. I felt something better. Control. But revenge wasn't only about legal wins. There was one final piece left to reclaim. Myself. The paperwork moved faster than I expected. Mark signed the preliminary settlement within a week. No courtroom drama, no public spectacle, just quiet legal dismantling of what used to be my marriage. He agreed to everything. House sale, retirement split, full responsibility for the equity line debt. My attorney's fees covered. For someone who once strutted around like he was untouchable, he suddenly looked very small. But the real shift wasn't financial. It was internal. For weeks I had operated like a strategist, calculating, documenting, executing. Now that the dust was settling, the silence felt different. He wasn't coming home. Lena wasn't calling. The chaos had burned itself out. And for the first time since I unlocked that phone, I allowed myself to sit with the hurt. I cried that night. Not because I wanted him back, but because 7 years of memories don't evaporate. Just because someone betrays you, they linger, they echo. I cried for the version of me who trusted blindly, for the girl who thought loyalty was guaranteed if you gave it fully. But I didn't cry for long, because the next morning, I did something symbolic. I changed my last name back to my maiden name. Not out of spite, out of reclamation. At the bank, on social media, with the utilities, every document that tied me to him began to shift back into alignment with who I was before Mark. Friends started reaching out cautiously at first. I heard what happened. You okay? The tone was different. Not pity, respect. Because the story had circulated not as crazy wife exposes husband, but as woman finds proof and handles it like a professional. I never posted screenshots, never went on a rant, never aired dirty details publicly. And that restraint? It spoke louder than any revenge speech ever could. Lena, on the other hand, disappeared from our shared social circles, deleted photos, turned off comments, vanished. Reputation is fragile, and once cracked, it rarely repairs the same way. One evening, as I packed up old photo albums before listing the house, I found our wedding picture again. This time, I didn't look away. I studied the smiles, the certainty in our eyes, and instead of anger, I felt clarity. That woman in the photo wasn't weak. She was trusting. And now, she was wiser. I placed the picture in a box labeled past. Not trash, not treasure, just history. Because revenge may have started this journey. But rebuilding? That was the real victory. And I was only getting started. Listing the house felt surreal. Realtors walked through rooms that once held dinner parties, holidays, and quiet Sunday mornings. They spoke in square footage and market trends while I stood there remembering laughter that now felt like it belonged to strangers. Columbus market is still strong, the agent said confidently. You'll sell fast. Good. I didn't want the house anymore. Not because it was tainted, but because I had outgrown it. Every wall held a version of me that accepted breadcrumbs while calling it love. Every corner echoed with conversations I replayed differently now, spotting red flags I once dismissed. The first showing was awkward. I left before the buyers arrived, sitting in my car down the street, watching strangers walk into what used to be my life. It didn't hurt the way I expected. It felt transitional. Mark texted about logistics. Short, professional, no emojis, no emotion. How much are we listing at? Offer came in. Reviewing. We were business partners now, nothing more. I heard through mutual friends that he'd been keeping his head down at work. Apparently HR had strongly advised him to maintain professionalism after rumors began circulating. Nothing official, just a quiet warning. Reputation doesn't explode overnight. It erodes. Lena's situation was worse. Her fiancé didn't just leave, he moved out immediately and told both families exactly why. Word spread through their social circles like wildfire. Engagement photos disappeared from her profile. Comments disabled. She tried reaching out once more. A long text. I never meant for it to go this far. I was lonely. He made me feel seen. I read it twice, then deleted it. Lonely doesn't excuse betrayal. Feeling seen doesn't justify deception. And I wasn't her emotional safety net anymore. A week later, we received an offer on the house above asking price. I signed the acceptance papers without hesitation. The closing date was set for 30 days out. 30 days until that chapter officially ended. That night, I walked through each emptying room slowly. Boxes stacked near the door. Closets cleared. Echoes louder now. Instead of sadness, I felt something unexpected. Anticipation. Not for another relationship. Not for revenge round two. But for independence. For a space that belonged solely to me. For mornings where I didn't question tone shifts or secret smiles at phones. For nights where silence meant peace, not suspicion. Mark called unexpectedly as I was sealing a box. Do you hate me? He asked quietly. I paused. No, I said honestly. I outgrew you. Silence. Then a soft exhale. I never thought you'd walk away this clean. I almost smiled. You never thought I'd look. And that was the truth. Because everything changed the moment I chose clarity over comfort. And soon, when the house sold and the ink dried on every document, there would be nothing tying me to the man who underestimated me, except a lesson, and I intended to use it well. The day of the house closing arrived faster than I expected. I woke early, drinking coffee on the porch while movers began hauling the last boxes out. The house looked smaller now, stripped of furniture, photos and memories that no longer served me. The walls seemed to breathe, as if finally relieved of the tension that had lingered there for years. Mark showed up precisely at the scheduled time. Suit pressed, eyes careful, trying to appear composed. He looked at the empty rooms like they were unfamiliar. "You've done well," he said slowly. I didn't smile. I didn't nod. I simply handed him the final paperwork. "This is it," I said. "Sign here, here, and here." He paused at the signature line for our final agreement, thumb hovering over the pen. "It feels unreal," he murmured. "All of this over a few months of mistakes." "Mistakes?" I asked softly. 6 hotel visits, hundreds of messages, misusing marital funds. That's not a mistake. That's a choice. His shoulders slumped. The air around him had shifted from arrogance to exhaustion. He signed the papers without another word. The closing agent handed me the keys to my new apartment, a smaller place. But mine! No shared locks, no secrets, no ghosts. I left the house last. Standing in the empty living room, I ran my fingers over the banister, over the kitchen counter, over the walls. 7 years of laughter, heartbreak, and betrayal. Every memory traced back to a lesson learned. I didn't feel relief yet. I didn't feel triumph either. But I felt something stronger. Closure. Outside, Lena's name flickered through my mind one last time. She had vanished completely. No social media, no messages, no mutual connections. The fiend had moved on, leaving her reputation in ruins. A harsh lesson, but justice in its own way. Mark tried contacting me one final time after the sale. A single voicemail. I hope you're happy. I never wanted this to happen. I didn't call back. I didn't need to. I didn't need his validation or apology. That night, I unpacked the first box in my new apartment. The wedding photos, the souvenirs from trips we'd taken, and a single photo of me smiling alone. I placed it on a shelf, not as a reminder of loss, but as a symbol of survival. I sat down on the empty couch, the soft hum of the city outside my window filling the silence. For the first time in months, I wasn't waiting for betrayal or anticipating deceit. I was just free. And that freedom, it was intoxicating. The revenge had served its purpose. The betrayal had been exposed, the consequences delivered, and my life reclaimed. Now, it was time for me to rebuild stronger, wiser, and untouchable. Because revenge isn't about ruin alone. It's about reclaiming yourself from the people who thought they could break you. And I had done exactly that. The first week in my new apartment was quiet, almost eerily so. No familiar creaks of the old house. No whispers of memories I couldn't escape. Just the hum of the city, distant traffic, and my own thoughts. I spent the mornings running errands, setting up my kitchen and arranging the bare walls. For the first time, everything belonged to me. No shared decisions, no compromises, no lies hiding behind closed doors. One evening, I walked past a small cafe a few blocks away and caught a glimpse of myself in the window reflection. The woman staring back wasn't the same one who unlocked a phone and discovered betrayal. She wasn't trembling or numb. She was poised, calculated, alive. The revenge had been delivered meticulously. Mark's finances exposed. Lena's betrayal unveiled. Reputations shattered, but the true victory was in this transformation. Every sleepless night spent planning, every careful move in court, every silent text left unanswered, had forged a sharper version of me. Friends slowly returned, not the ones who would gossip or betray, but those who respected boundaries and strength. They offered dinners, coffee dates, and long conversations that weren't punctuated by secrets or half-truths. It felt real, safe, and earned. One night, I received a text from a friend I hadn't seen in months. "You're glowing. Are you okay?" I smiled. More than okay. I was thriving. I thought about Mark and Lena occasionally. How they had underestimated me. How comfortable they were in their deceit. How they thought secrecy could protect them. But the truth has a way of finding the light, always. I deleted all the evidence from my personal devices. The hotel receipts, the messages, the photos. I didn't need them anymore. Their consequences were already in motion. Legal, social, and emotional. Their reckoning was complete. I sat on my balcony one evening, a glass of wine in hand, looking over the skyline. Freedom tastes like cool air and the satisfaction of knowing that betrayal cannot define you. The woman who once unlocked a phone in confusion had grown into someone formidable, someone who could endure betrayal, orchestrate justice, and rise above the chaos. Someone who no longer needed validation from anyone who had lied or cheated. I whispered to myself quietly, almost as a mantra, I am enough. I am unstoppable. I am free. And in that moment, I realized that the story of revenge was no longer theirs. It was mine. Every step I had taken, every carefully executed plan, had led me here, stronger, smarter, untouchable. The past no longer controlled me. I had rewritten my story, and this time, it would be written on my terms. Weeks turned into months. The apartment felt more like home each day. I painted the walls my favorite colors, muted grays and soft creams, and placed carefully chosen furniture that spoke to me, not to anyone else. Every decision was mine alone, a quiet rebellion against the years of compromise. I started focusing on my career with renewed vigor. My work, which I had let slide while navigating a marriage I thought was stable, became a sanctuary. Projects that I once procrastinated on were completed with precision. Colleagues noticed the change. They commented on my confidence, my presence, and the air of someone who had faced fire and come out sharper. One evening, I ran into an acquaintance who knew Mark and Lena. They couldn't resist asking about the scandal. I smiled politely. That's all in the past. The subtle power in my calm answer was intoxicating. People assumed chaos, humiliation, and regret. Instead, they were met with composure and authority. That was the real victory. I began keeping a journal again, documenting my daily achievements, my reflections, and my plans for the future. It was cathartic, a private reminder that I was no longer defined by someone else's betrayal. Social media became a tool for rebuilding, not comparison. I posted photos of travel, small victories at work, and moments of joy. No one needed to know the details of the past. The revenge had been dealt. The lesson had been taught. Silence was louder than any public accusation I could make. Mark attempted one last contact, through mutual friends. He asked if I could at least speak in person to close things amicably. I politely declined. Closing the door physically was less important than the fact that I had already locked away the past emotionally. Lena resurfaced online eventually, but the fallout from her engagement in our social circle made her cautious. I observed quietly, noting that actions always have consequences, and some lessons can't be undone. By mid-year, I had saved enough to move into a larger apartment. I didn't advertise it. I didn't need to. I simply signed the lease, packed my things, and stepped into a space that represented freedom, resilience, and self-determination. One night, I poured myself a glass of wine and looked out over the city skyline. The lights flickered like tiny reminders that the world kept turning, indifferent to betrayal, revenge, or heartbreak. And yet, I was no longer indifferent. I had learned patience, strategy, and the power of observation. I had learned that revenge was effective not in anger, but in careful calculation. Most importantly, I had learned that reclaiming yourself after betrayal is the ultimate triumph. For the first time in years, I felt complete, whole, and unshakable. The story of betrayal had ended, but the story of me, the woman who endured, outsmarted, and rebuilt, had only just begun. The morning sunlight poured through my new apartment windows like a promise. For the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't wake with tension or anxiety. No creeping dread that someone I loved was hiding secrets behind closed doors. No flicker of doubt when a phone buzzed. Just calm. I brewed coffee, sat by the window, and sipped slowly, letting the quiet fill me. The city buzzed below, oblivious to the personal storms I had weathered and survived. And that was exactly how I wanted it. Weeks turned into months, and I began to truly flourish. Work thrived as I poured energy into projects that had long been neglected. Friends, both old and new, became an extended support system. They didn't pity me. They respected me. I could laugh again, genuinely, without the shadow of betrayal darkening my smile. Mark's presence in my life faded completely. He moved out of town for work, leaving behind the remnants of a marriage he had taken for granted. Lena disappeared from the social circle entirely, replaced by whispers about choices she couldn't undo. Both of them had learned lessons the hard way, but I didn't relish in their downfall. I simply allowed truth to speak for itself. One evening, As I unpacked the last of my boxes, I found an old photo from my college days. It was a snapshot of me laughing with friends, carefree, unaware of heartbreak or betrayal. I held it in my hands and smiled. That version of me had survived, but so had a stronger, wiser version, one capable of facing adversity without losing herself. I framed the photo and placed it on my shelf, not as a reminder of loss, but as a symbol of growth. Life wasn't perfect, and it never would be, but I had reclaimed control over my story, and that was enough. By now, the lessons of revenge had faded into strategy and clarity. I didn't crave retaliation anymore. I didn't need to watch over my shoulder. My energy was invested in building the life I wanted, not tearing down the lives of those who betrayed me. I enrolled in a self-defense class, not because I feared them, but because I refused to ever feel powerless again. I traveled, explored new hobbies, and met people who inspired me. I dated cautiously, always keeping my heart aware but unhurried. One night, sitting on the balcony with the city lights twinkling below, I whispered quietly to myself, I survived betrayal. I survived lies. And I built myself stronger than ever. No one could take that away from me. Mark and Lena were gone. Their chaos had been neutralized. The house was sold. The financial battles resolved. My reputation intact. My dignity restored. And in the quiet aftermath, I discovered something far more powerful than revenge. Peace. The kind of peace that comes not from retaliation, but from reclaiming your life and refusing to be defined by the failures of others. I smiled. For the first time in years, I felt completely free. The first weeks of solitude were unexpectedly comforting. I had imagined that being alone would feel hollow, like a missing limb, but instead, it felt like breathing with new lungs. Every quiet morning was a reminder that I could exist entirely on my own terms. I started keeping a daily routine that centered around me. Mornings were for exercise and reflection, a jog through the park, journal in hand, noting thoughts and goals without interruption. Afternoons were for work, deep dives into projects I'd once postponed. Evenings were for simple pleasures, cooking a meal I genuinely enjoyed, reading by the window, or exploring new corners of the city I hadn't noticed before. Mark's absence became less of a wound and more of a relief. No tension, no silent accusations, no gaslighting. Every memory of betrayal that once lingered in the hallways of our shared home had been replaced with the freedom to decide how I spent my energy. Friends started noticing the change. They remarked on my calm presence, my measured words, and the subtle power in my posture. I realized that living deliberately, instead of reacting, made me formidable. I no longer needed to assert dominance through confrontation. My life itself was proof of resilience. I also began investing in myself financially. I opened separate accounts, built a budget tailored to my ambitions, and even explored new investment options. Independence wasn't just emotional anymore, it was practical, tangible, and undeniable. One afternoon, while browsing a bookstore, I found a section on strategic thinking and negotiation. I laughed quietly, thinking of the precise moves I had orchestrated months earlier. It was almost like I had been living a masterclass in real-life strategy without realizing it. At night, I allowed myself small reflections. How far I had come, how calculated patience had replaced impulse, how betrayal had transformed into clarity and strength. I no longer feared solitude. I embraced it as a source of empowerment. Sometimes, I thought of Mark and Lena. I didn't fantasize about revenge anymore. Their downfall had already been secured. Their lives had been permanently altered by their choices, and I had walked away with more than they could ever take from me. The true lesson had revealed itself slowly. Strength isn't just surviving a betrayal. Strength is thriving afterward. Thriving so completely that no one's deception can ever touch your peace again. For the first time in years, I felt untethered from the past. Free to shape my future. Free to trust carefully. And free to savor life on my own terms. And that freedom, quiet, deliberate, unstoppable, became the ultimate testament to the power of reclaiming yourself. Months had passed since the house sold. Since Mark and Lena's lives had splintered from mine, I realized that surviving betrayal wasn't just about exposing lies or reclaiming finances. It was about rebuilding boundaries. And for the first time, I understood the weight of personal space, trust, and emotional sovereignty. I started by evaluating my friendships. Some old friends drifted away during the chaos, not out of malice, but because they couldn't navigate the storm. That was fine. It left room for the people who mattered, those who respected honesty and integrity. I strengthened connections with colleagues, neighbors, and even acquaintances, consciously choosing relationships that uplifted me rather than drained me. Next came my digital life. Social media had been a weapon in the past, either for exposing secrets or monitoring betrayals. I cleaned up profiles, restricted access, and removed any traces of the old household. Photos, tagged posts, vacation memories all gone or archived privately. I replaced the curated past with images and moments that reflected independence, adventure, and authenticity. I also established new routines that prioritized self-care. Weekly yoga classes, solo museum trips, and journaling became anchors. I realized that reclaiming control wasn't about obsessing over what happened, it was about building habits that nurtured me physically, mentally, and emotionally. Professionally, I began taking more initiative at work. With Mark and Lena no longer diverting my energy into anxiety and anger, I could channel it into growth. I pitched new projects, took on leadership opportunities, and mentored colleagues. The respect I earned now was real, earned through competence and composure, not manufactured from fear or spectacle. Perhaps most importantly, I learned the art of saying no. No to toxic relationships, no to compromising my values, no to lingering resentment that didn't serve me. Every no was a brick in the foundation of a life designed solely for me. Sometimes I thought about Mark's brief attempt at reconciliation. I didn't regret being harsh or distant. It was necessary. I had once trusted him blindly, and he had exploited it. But that memory now carried less pain and more clarity, a reminder of why boundaries were crucial. I slept better at night, lighter in spirit, confident in my space and my choices. I no longer felt the pull of anger or desire for revenge. It had served its purpose and faded naturally, replaced by a sense of empowerment I never imagined I could achieve. For the first time, betrayal had become a teacher rather than a tormentor. By the time winter rolled in, I had settled fully into my new life. My apartment was warm and inviting, decorated to reflect the woman I had become, strong, independent, and unafraid of solitude. Every item I owned, furniture, books, art, told a story of choice and intention. Nothing was left to chance, and nothing belonged to anyone else. But with independence came a new challenge, learning to trust again. Betrayal had taught me vigilance, yes, but it also left scars. I noticed it in small ways: hesitation before answering calls, scanning a room when meeting someone new, weighing motives before accepting invitations. I had to remind myself that not everyone was deceitful. Some people simply deserved a chance. I began slowly. I reconnected with friends I knew had been loyal, people whose support had never wavered. I shared small vulnerabilities, little truths about my life that weren't tied to Mark or Lena, and as they listened, I felt a warmth that had been absent for far too long. I realized that trust wasn't about naivety. It was about discernment, choosing carefully, but still choosing. Even dating became a test of boundaries and patience. I wasn't interested in jumping back into a relationship or seeking validation from someone new. Instead, I focused on meeting people who mirrored the respect and integrity I valued. Casual dinners, conversations about ambitions, laughter that didn't hide tension. It was all part of the careful rebuilding of my social world. At work, I found that my reputation had transformed. Colleagues admired not only my competence but also my composure. They saw someone who had endured chaos and emerged unshaken. Invitations to collaborate came more frequently. Opportunities to lead projects and represent the company at conferences were suddenly within reach. I realized that my resilience had become a quiet form of authority. One evening, sitting on the balcony with a cup of tea, I reflected on the journey. Betrayal had forced me into wariness, strategy, and revenge, but it had also revealed my own strength, patience, and intelligence. I had learned that reclaiming oneself wasn't about vengeance alone. It was about rising higher, living deliberately, and refusing to let someone else's choices define my happiness. And in that quiet, reflective moment, I understood a truth I hadn't fully grasped before. The greatest power in life comes not from punishing others, but from rebuilding yourself so completely that no betrayal can ever reach you again. I smiled to myself, feeling the kind of peace that only comes after a storm has passed. By early spring, my life had settled into a rhythm I had never experienced before. Every morning felt deliberate, a choice rather than a routine imposed by circumstance. I woke, exercised, and spent the quiet hours planning my days without interruption or fear. No hidden phones, no secret meetings, no betrayals lurking behind closed doors. Just me. The silence was powerful. It wasn't lonely. It was a statement. I had survived chaos, exposed deception, and dismantled the lives of those who underestimated me. Yet the most profound victory wasn't the revenge itself. It was the calm that followed, the absence of drama, and the clarity that comes when you stop reacting to others' choices and start acting for yourself. At work, I had become more assertive. I took on leadership roles, presented bold ideas, and mentored younger colleagues. My presence commanded attention not through intimidation, but through the quiet confidence of someone who had endured betrayal and refused to be broken. Every project I completed was a reminder I was more than what had happened to me. I was capable, focused, and resilient. Friends noticed the difference. They commented on the peace I exuded, the lightness in my laughter, the way I carried myself. I laughed genuinely now, not forced or cautious, but free. I realized that strength wasn't loud or vengeful. It was the ability to continue living fully despite the wounds left behind. Sometimes memories of Mark and Lena surfaced. I thought about the hotel room, the messages, the lies, and I smiled quietly, not with malice, but with recognition of the lessons they had imparted. Their choices had been predictable, but my response had been precise. And in that precision, I had found power. Evenings became sacred. I would sit on the balcony, a book in hand, tea steaming beside me, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. The world kept turning, indifferent to betrayal, yet I felt entirely in control. Life wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about growth, independence, and the deliberate construction of a future where I mattered most. I realized something important. Surviving betrayal doesn't just reveal strength. It reveals clarity, the ability to distinguish between who belongs in your life and who doesn't, the courage to remove toxicity completely, the power to rebuild with intention, integrity, and purpose. And in that quiet, deliberate life I had created, I understood fully no one could ever touch the peace I had fought so hard to earn. Just when life felt completely steady, the past decided to test me one more time. It happened on an ordinary Thursday evening. I had just finished a late meeting downtown and stopped by a small wine bar near my office. Soft lighting, low music, the kind of place where no one asks too many questions. I ordered a glass of red and opened my laptop, intending to review notes. And then I heard a familiar voice. I didn't have to look up to know. Mark. My heartbeat didn't spike. My hands didn't shake. That alone told me how far I'd come. I glanced up calmly. He looked thinner, tired, less polished than I remembered. The confidence he once wore like cologne had faded into something quieter, almost uncertain. Our eyes met. For a second, he seemed surprised, then hesitant, then almost relieved. He approached slowly. Hey, hi Mark. No bitterness, no venom, just acknowledgement. Can I sit? He asked. I considered it for a brief moment, not because I owed him anything, but because I wanted to measure my own reaction. Sure, I said evenly. He sat across from me, hands clasped together like he was in a job interview. You look good, he said carefully. I am good. There was a long pause. I moved back, he admitted. The job transfer didn't work out. I nodded politely. I hope things improve. He studied my face, searching for something: anger, regret, longing. He found none. I messed up, he said quietly, more than I realized at the time. I took a slow sip of wine before responding. Yes, you did. No dramatics, no lecture, just truth. He exhaled, like he'd expected a different reaction. Maybe a reopening of wounds, maybe a chance to justify himself. Instead, he got composure. I never thought you'd walk away like that, he admitted. So clean. I didn't walk away. I corrected gently. I stepped forward. That seemed to land. He nodded slowly. Are you seeing someone? He asked. I smiled slightly. That's not your concern anymore. Another pause. I deserved what happened, he finally said. I just didn't expect you to be that strategic. I almost laughed. You underestimated me, I replied. And that was the truth. After a few more minutes of surface-level conversation, I closed my laptop and stood. It was good seeing you, Mark, I said calmly. Take care of yourself. And I meant it. As I walked out of the bar into the cool night air, I felt nothing heavy pulling at me. No anger. No desire for revenge. Just closure. The universe had handed me a final test and I had passed without hesitation. Because the strongest revenge isn't exposure. It isn't humiliation. It's indifference. And I had mastered it. After running into Mark, I expected old emotions to resurface. They didn't. Instead, something unexpected happened. I felt lighter. For so long, even after the divorce and the strategic unraveling of their affair, there had been a tiny thread connecting me to the past. Not love, not anger, just unfinished energy. Seeing him diminished, reflective, human cut that final thread. He wasn't the villain in my story anymore. He was just a man who made selfish choices and paid for them. And I was no longer the woman who had been betrayed. I was the woman who rebuilt. That weekend, I did something symbolic. I went through the last box labeled important. Inside were documents from the divorce, printed screenshots I had kept just in case, and a small folder of evidence I once treated like ammunition. I sat at my dining table and looked at everything carefully. This had once been my armor, my leverage, my proof. Now, it was unnecessary weight. I fed the copies into a small shredder, listening to the quiet mechanical hum as the past turned into confetti. Not because it didn't matter, but because it didn't control me anymore. Later that evening, I received an unexpected message, not from Mark, from Lena. It was brief. I heard you ran into him. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry for everything. I stared at the message for a long time. Months ago, that apology would have felt like validation. Now, it felt irrelevant, not worthless, just late. I typed back 3 simple words. I forgive you. Not for her, for me. Then I blocked the number. Forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. It means release. The next week, something extraordinary happened at work. I was offered a leadership role, a promotion I had been quietly working toward for months. When my manager explained the decision, he said something that stayed with me. You've shown incredible composure under pressure. That's rare. Composure under pressure. If only he knew. I accepted the position without hesitation. The woman who once stood in a hotel hallway listening to chaos unfold was now stepping into boardrooms with authority and calm. Growth isn't loud. It's layered. It's built in moments where you choose dignity over drama, peace over pride, forward over backward. That night, standing on my balcony again, I realized something powerful. Revenge was never the end goal. It was the catalyst. The real transformation happened afterward, in silence, in strategy, in rebuilding brick by brick. And now, there was nothing left tying me to that chapter. Only a lesson, and a life that felt entirely, beautifully mine. The promotion changed more than my job title. It changed how I saw myself. I was no longer operating from recovery mode. I wasn't rebuilding from rubble anymore. I was designing a life intentionally, strategically, the same way I had dismantled the one built on lies. My new role required travel, presentations, leadership, over teams that once intimidated me. The first time I stood at the head of a long conference table, outlining quarterly strategy with steady confidence, I felt something click into place. This is who I am now. Not someone's wife. Not someone's victim. Not someone's revenge story. Just me. With authority. With clarity. With control. The more responsibility I took on, the more I realized how much emotional bandwidth betrayal had once consumed. Suspicion, anxiety, overthinking. All of it had drained energy I could have invested elsewhere. Now that energy was mine again, I started planning bigger things. A solo trip to Seattle, a certification course to expand my credentials, an investment portfolio that reflected long-term independence. Each decision felt deliberate, not reactive. One evening, While packing for my first business trip in my new role, I caught my reflection in the mirror. Confident posture, sharp blazer, eyes steady. I didn't look hardened. I looked seasoned. There's a difference. Hardness comes from bitterness. Seasoning comes from experience. And I had earned every layer. During the trip, I met people who knew nothing about my past. To them, I was simply competent, composed, decisive. It was freeing to exist without context. At dinner with colleagues, someone joked about relationships and heartbreak. I smiled politely, listening, but I didn't feel triggered or exposed. My story wasn't a wound anymore. It was wisdom. Late that night in my hotel room, a different kind of hotel room, I realized how symbolic it felt. Months ago, hotels represented secrecy and betrayal. Now, they represented opportunity and growth. Same setting, different meaning. That's what transformation does. It reclaims spaces that once held pain. When I returned home, I received a forwarded message from a mutual acquaintance. Mark had started dating again. I read it without reaction. No jealousy, no resentment, no curiosity, just neutrality. Because my chapter with him wasn't paused. It was closed. And for the first time since unlocking that phone, I understood something deeply. The greatest revenge wasn't exposure. It wasn't financial leverage. It wasn't social fallout. It was evolution. And I had evolved beyond anything they could ever reach again. By summer, my life felt expansive. Not busy in a chaotic way, expansive in a deliberate, controlled way. My calendar was full, but with things I chose. Travel, strategy meetings, weekend hikes, dinners with people who inspired me instead of drained me. One Saturday morning, I hosted a small gathering at my apartment, something I hadn't done since before the divorce. Just a few close friends, good wine, music humming softly in the background. At one point, someone raised a toast. To strength, she said, and to rebuilding. Everyone clinked glasses. I smiled, but internally I corrected it. Not rebuilding, upgrading. Rebuilding implies restoring what once was. I had built something better. Later that evening, after everyone left and the apartment grew quiet again, I sat on the couch reflecting on how drastically my inner dialogue had changed. Months ago, my thoughts were tactical. Gather evidence, secure finances, control the narrative. Then they shifted. Protect peace, reclaim identity, strengthen boundaries. Now, they were visionary. What's next? What do I want? How far can I go? The past no longer occupied mental space unless I intentionally revisited it, and when I did, it felt like reviewing a completed chapter in a book I had already shelved. I thought about the woman standing in that hotel hallway, listening to panic erupt behind a closed door. She wasn't weak. She wasn't broken. She was calculating. And because of her, I was here. I had learned something profound through betrayal. Power isn't loud. It doesn't scream. It doesn't chase. Power observes, plans, executes, and then moves on. That night, I opened my laptop and updated my 5-year goals. International expansion in my role. Property ownership solely mine. Personal growth targets that had nothing to do with proving anything to anyone. No part of my future included revenge. No part included bitterness. Only ambition. A week later, I received a LinkedIn message from someone I met during my last business trip, a potential collaboration opportunity. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't dramatic. It was growth. And growth felt intoxicating. Standing on my balcony again, my favorite ritual, I realized something that made me laugh softly. Mark and Lena probably thought the affair was the thrilling part. The secret, the risk, the adrenaline. They mistook chaos for excitement. I discovered something better. Control, evolution, self-respect. And unlike their fragile thrill, mine was sustainable. I wasn't surviving anymore. I was expanding. And the best part? No one could ever pull the rug out from under me again. Because I built my foundation alone. Life has a strange sense of timing. Just when I felt completely detached from the past, it brushed against me again, not painfully, just curiously. It came in the form of an email invitation. A mutual friend was hosting a large networking gala downtown. Professionals, entrepreneurs, community leaders. My name was on the guest list as a featured attendee because of my recent promotion. At the bottom of the email, I noticed something interesting. Mark's company was listed as one of the event sponsors. I stared at the screen for a moment. A year ago, I might have declined to avoid discomfort. Now, I arfed yes without hesitation. The night of the event, I dressed deliberately not to impress him, not to intimidate anyone but because I felt powerful. A tailored black dress, minimal jewelry, hair sleek and simple. When I walked into the ballroom, conversations hummed, glasses clinked, cameras flashed. The energy was sophisticated, controlled. And then I saw him. Across the room, Mark stood near the sponsor banner, speaking with a small group. He looked composed, professional smile, confident stance, but there was something different in his posture. Less arrogance, more caution. He noticed me a few minutes later. I watched a moment recognition hit. Not shock, not regret. Recognition. He excused himself from the group but didn't approach immediately. Instead, he observed, likely assessing whether I would ignore him or acknowledge him. I chose neither. I continued networking, shaking hands, exchanging cards, laughing naturally, because my presence wasn't about him anymore. After nearly an hour, he finally walked over. "You look," he started, then stopped. "Focused?" I offered calmly. He nodded slightly. "You're doing well." "I am," I said simply. There was no tension, no emotional charge, just two adults standing in a room full of people who saw us as professionals, not as a failed marriage. "I'm glad," he said quietly, and for the first time, I believed he meant it. We spoke briefly, surface-level topics, work, market shifts, mutual acquaintances. The conversation was balanced, neutral. At one point, someone interrupted to congratulate me on my leadership role. As they walked away, Mark looked at me thoughtfully. "You've changed," he said. "Yes," I replied. He waited, as if expecting more explanation. But I didn't give him one. Growth doesn't require justification. Eventually, he returned to his group. I stayed another hour, made valuable connections, and left on my own terms. As I stepped into the cool night air, I realized something subtle but powerful. This wasn't about proving anything. It wasn't about showing him what he lost. It was about walking into a room where we both existed and knowing I carried no weight from the past. The affair once felt like an earthquake. Now, it felt like a chapter in a biography I'd already outgrown. And the most satisfying part, I didn't need revenge anymore. I had presence, and presence is permanent. 2 weeks after the gala, my phone buzzed late on a Thursday evening. "Mark." I stared at the screen for a moment before answering. Not because I was nervous, but because I genuinely wondered what he could possibly want now. "Hey," he said, his voice steady but quieter than usual. "Do you have a minute?" "I do." There was a pause, the kind filled with words carefully chosen before being spoken. "I've been meaning to say this for a long time," he began. "Not to fix anything, not to reopen anything, just to say it." I leaned back against my kitchen counter, calm. "I underestimated you," he said. "When we were married, I thought I knew who you were. I thought I understood your limits. I didn't." That almost made me smile. "You didn't." I agreed gently. "I thought you'd fall apart," he admitted. "I told myself you wouldn't handle it well, that you'd be angry, vindictive." "I was strategic," I corrected. He exhaled softly. "Yeah, you were." Silence again, but not uncomfortable. "I'm sorry," he said finally. Not rushed, not defensive, just clear. And in that moment, I searched myself for any leftover resentment. There wasn't any. "I know," I replied. It surprised him. "You know?" "I've known for a while that you regretted it," I said. "But regret and growth aren't the same thing." He didn't argue. "I am working on the growth part," he said quietly. "I hope you are," I answered, meaning it. Because here's what I'd learned. Forgiveness isn't about excusing behavior. It's about releasing ownership of the pain. And I had already done that months ago. "I didn't call to disrupt your life," he added. "I just didn't want the last chapter of our story to be silence." I considered that. "Our last chapter," I said slowly, "wasn't silence. It was accountability." He didn't respond immediately. "You were the strongest person in that marriage," he said finally. "No," I corrected again. "I became the strongest person because of how it ended." That was the truth. After we hung up, I didn't feel nostalgic. I didn't feel sad. I felt finished. Closure doesn't come from apologies. It comes from transformation. I walked to my balcony, the city lights stretching endlessly below. The air felt different tonight, lighter. The woman who once gathered evidence in silence had evolved into someone who no longer needed leverage. I didn't win because he lost. I won because I rebuilt smarter, sharper, self-sufficient. The marriage ended. The betrayal happened. The revenge unfolded. But the real story? It was never about them. It was about the woman who refused to collapse. And this time, when I looked toward the future, there were no shadows behind me, only open sky. 6 months later, my life no longer felt like a recovery story. It felt like momentum. Work had expanded in ways I once hesitated to pursue. I was leading projects that carried weight, the kind that shaped long-term strategy instead of temporary fixes. My name circulated in rooms I hadn't even known existed 2 years ago. One afternoon, I was invited to speak on a leadership panel about resilience in high-pressure environments. Resilience. The word made me pause. People often romanticize resilience as endurance, as surviving storms. But resilience, I'd learned, is selective. It's choosing what deserves your energy and what doesn't. On stage, beneath soft lights and polite applause, I shared something I hadn't articulated publicly before. Strength, I said into the microphone, isn't about reacting. It's about responding with intention. When something destabilizes you, the real power lies in how deliberately you rebuild. I didn't mention betrayal. I didn't mention divorce. I didn't mention evidence folders and quiet strategy. But every word carried it. After the event, a young woman approached me. I needed to hear that, she said. I'm going through something difficult, and I feel like I'm losing control. I looked at her and recognized the expression. That mixture of fear and pride that keeps you standing even when you want to collapse. You're not losing control, I told her gently. You're gathering it. Her eyes softened, as if something clicked. And in that moment, I realized something unexpected. The experience that once felt humiliating had become instructional. Not because it was painful, but because I transformed it into leverage. That night, alone in my apartment, I reviewed my updated goals again. I had purchased my first investment property entirely under my name. I was negotiating a partnership deal that would take me international next year. I had built a small but trusted circle of friends who valued growth over gossip. There was no drama in my life anymore. No secrecy. No adrenaline spikes. No whispered conversations in hallways. Just clarity. And clarity is addictive. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I had confronted everything in anger that night at the hotel. If I had screamed, exposed, reacted emotionally. Maybe it would have felt satisfying for a moment, but it wouldn't have built this. Strategic silence built this. Calculated action built this. Emotional discipline built this. I no longer replay old memories. They served their purpose. The affair wasn't my breaking point. It was my pivot. And as I closed my laptop, turned off the lights, and stepped onto the balcony one more time before bed, I understood something deeply. My legacy won't be defined by betrayal. It will be defined by elevation. I didn't just survive what happened. I used it, and that makes all the difference. A year and a half after the night that changed everything, I stood in a space that didn't exist back then. My name was etched onto a small glass plaque outside a conference room, not because of marriage, not because of association, but because I had built something from the ground up. My own consulting branch, my own team, my own decisions, ownership, not just legally, mentally, emotionally. That morning, as sunlight poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I watched my team prepare for a presentation with a major client. There was energy in the room, focused, confident, forward-moving. This was the life I created after the collapse, not a reaction to loss, a response to it. Later that afternoon, I signed the final paperwork on my second property investment. As I held the pen, I remembered signing very different documents months earlier: divorce papers, financial disclosures, agreements that marked an ending. Those signatures felt heavy. This one felt expansive. When I walked out of the building, my phone buzzed with a calendar reminder. Anniversary, not of the marriage, of the day I chose strategy over chaos. I smiled at the quiet symbolism of it. That night, instead of reflecting in solitude, I hosted a small dinner with the people who had witnessed my evolution. Friends who saw the silent strength, the calculated steps, the refusal to crumble. At one point, Someone asked me, if you could go back and warn yourself before everything happened, would you? I considered it honestly. No, because the woman I was before would never have become the woman I am now without the fracture. Pain, when handled correctly, sharpens you. Betrayal, when processed with discipline, educates you. Silence, when used strategically, empowers you. After dinner, when everyone left, I stepped onto the balcony one last time. The same ritual that had framed so many turning points. The city lights stretched endlessly, but this time I didn't look at them searching for reassurance. I looked at them knowing I belonged among them. Mark and Lena, they were no longer chapters I revisited. They were catalysts. And catalysts don't remain central to the story. They trigger transformation and fade. The greatest revenge was never exposure. It was elevation. The greatest victory was never humiliation. It was independence. And the greatest closure was never his apology. It was my indifference. I once gathered evidence in the dark. Now I gather opportunities in the light. The woman who stood in that hotel hallway didn't know it yet, but she was about to meet the strongest version of herself. And now, she's here, not surviving, not proving, not avenging, thriving. That is where this story ends. Not with destruction, but with expansion. And this time, the foundation beneath me is unshakable.